Fans have been waiting well over a decade for 28 years later to come out. Now it's here, and we may have more questions than answers. Warning, spoilers ahead. The movie takes place, 28 years after a rage virus that wiped out most of the population of Great Britain started spreading. We quickly learn that the British Isles are still under quarantine and that the infected are still a serious problem. The film follows a young family living in an island village off the mainland in a small and tight-knit community. As part of a coming-of-age ritual, the father, a middle-aged man named Jamie, takes his 12-year-old son, Spike, to the mainland to hunt infected. They barely make it out alive, but while they're out there, Spike sees a fire and learns that a doctor named Ian Kelson is living on the mainland. Spike's mother, Isla, is sick, and since no one in the village has been able to help her, he thinks that if he can get his mom to Dr. Kelson, he may be able to save her. So, in a classic don't go out there moment, Spike decides to sneak his mother out of the village and back onto the mainland. What could go wrong? Well, for one, they get attacked by infected and only survive thanks to the help of Eric, a NATO soldier who's a lone survivor of his team's shipwreck. They also encounter a pregnant infected woman who gives birth to a baby that doesn't have the virus. Finally, Spike and Isla meet Dr. Kelson, who's been living among the infected for a long time. He's able to incapacitate them using morphine-laced darts and leads his new companions to his morbid sanctuary. Dun dun dun! Dr. Kelson diagnoses Isla with terminal cancer that has spread to her brain. With no hope for a cure, the only thing Kelson can do is give her a merciful death and remind Spike that death and love are both essential parts of life.
There are many kinds of death. Some are better than others.
Kelson brings Isla's skull back to Spike, who places it at the very top of Kelson's skull tower. Spike then takes the baby back to his island village, but chooses not to stay there himself. Instead, he leaves a note explaining that the baby was born of an infected but is still healthy, and then resolves to go back to the mainland to forge his own path. The film then jumps ahead 28 days into the future when Spike gets attacked by a horde of infected. He runs away but gets stuck at a massive barrier. Just when it seems like all hope is lost, a man named Jimmy shows up, and he and a group of other Jimmys quickly lay waste to the infected in an admittedly epic Power Rangers-esque fight sequence. And when the fight is over, Jimmy invites Spike to join them. It seems like all is well, right? Well, we're not exactly sure Jimmy can be trusted. Jimmy's introduction at the end of 28 years later actually brings the movie full circle. The film opens with a group of kids watching Teletubbies, and one of them is a blonde-haired boy with a familiar name.
Jimmy, sit still, keep quiet, and do not move from this spot.
Unfortunately, the rage virus infects adults in the building who attack the kids. Jimmy escapes and goes to a church to find his father, a vicar. But instead of trying to protect his son, he gives Jimmy a crucifix necklace and tells him to get away because he actively wants to be eaten by the infected. It wouldn't exactly take a detective to infer that the Jimmy we meet later is the same kid, all grown up. Director Danny Boyle has even confirmed it. Adult Jimmy even wears his father's necklace, though the cross is now hanging upside down, so it's safe to assume Jimmy's not exactly living by the church's teachings these days. He may save Spike's life, but there's something undeniably twisted about Jimmy and his crew, and those familiar with British pop culture know there's a good reason for that. Jimmy might literally be named Jimmy, but we doubt the fact that everyone else in his gang also goes by some variation of the same name was a happy coincidence. And since they all sport bleached blonde hair and colorful tracksuits, it's hard to ignore their strong resemblance to disgraced media personality Jimmy Savile. Savile was a British radio DJ throughout the 1970s and 80s, and he hosted children's programs like Play It Safe, where he pointed out potential dangers kids might encounter in homes. He was a beloved figure throughout his life and died in 2011. But a year after his death, hundreds of individuals came forward with serious allegations of misconduct, many involving underage victims. It may seem odd to reference such a horrific atrocity in a zombie movie, but it would kind of make sense that Jimmy idolizes Savile. The rage virus outbreak occurred in 2002, so the allegations against Savile were still years away from becoming public knowledge when the zombie apocalypse began. On top of that, Jimmy was watching TV while the adults around him tried to protect him from the infected, so he may have grown up viewing TV as a source of comfort. And if he watched Teletubbies, odds are he probably knew who Jimmy Savile was and looked up to him. Boyle confirmed to Business Insider that Jimmy and his cult are indeed inspired by Savile, saying, "It's all kind of twisting in this partial remembrance, clinging onto things and then recreating them as an image for followers." From its first moments, 28 years later considers what it means to grow up in a chaotic and violent world. Spike sees that with his own father, who cheats on his wife and lashes out violently when Spike disobeys him. He also sees it in his community, as the village's ritual of sending kids to the mainland to kill infected is a pretty pointless tradition with a lot of unnecessary risk involved.
You know, I feel he's a bit young.
He's ready, Jenny.
It's probably because of these forces that Spike ultimately leaves the village at the end of the film to forge his own identity. And while that seems like an optimistic note to end on, the fact that he quickly runs into the Jimmy gang makes us think he's not exactly due for a happy ending. Just look at the sheer glee the gang gives off while killing infected. It's tough to call killing zombies senseless violence, but the enthusiasm they have for it suggests there's definitely something sinister going on beneath the surface. And since they saved Spike's life, Spike probably feels indebted to them. On top of that, he's so young, Jimmy and the gang may be able to convince him to join them down a darker path that he'd tread on his own. There's no denying this is a pretty bleak movie, but outside of how things wrap up for Spike, there's another, more hopeful element sprinkled into the story: the baby. Dr. Kelson explains that the baby may have been spared its mother's infection thanks to the placenta, which suggests that the world could still change. Despite its tragic beginnings, the baby could grow up to have an absolutely normal life. And what if there are more like her? Does this mean that the world could go back to normal if the current crop of infected dies out? The baby also reminds us that the infected are still human. At least when the mother gave birth, she didn't attack Isla, which suggests that the zombies aren't the mindless killers that most people believe they are. That's at least the way Isla's actor, Jodie Comer, leans toward understanding that scene, and she told comicbook.com that she thinks that baby might represent a huge change within the franchise to come. While it's sort of the end of one trilogy, 28 Years Later also marks the start of a whole new one. Its sequel, 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, was filmed at the same time as this installment and is scheduled to come out in 2026. Hopefully this means that fans won't have to wait too long to get some of these answers. Spike's actor Alfie Williams will be returning, and we assume that Bone Temple will explore more of his new relationship with the Jimmy gang. Specific details about the new movie are sparse, but would bet that at least part of it will be dedicated to Spike realizing that his new friends might not be the heroes he initially thought. If there is humanity still left in the infected, we doubt the Jimmys would even care. But after what Spike's gone through, he may be more reluctant to kill them at random. Dr. Kelson's actor, Ralph Fiennes, is also set to return, and he made a similar observation to Entertainment Weekly. He said, "The theme of innate humanity, is it still alive in the soul, in the heart, in the mind of an infected person? Are they completely corrupted? Are they only rabid? Or is there the possibility of something human? It's still there." Cillian Murphy, who played Jim in 28 Days Later, will also play a role in the Bone Temple, though he might not be in it for very long. Boyle told Screen Rant that while Murphy will be a major piece in the movie following the Bone Temple, he called his appearance in the upcoming film a coda to the second movie. To us, it sounds like Jim will probably be teased in the Bone Temple in a very similar way to how Jimmy got introduced this time around. A lot of people were shocked by the complete shift in tone at the end of 28 Years Later, and that includes the director. But unlike a lot of viewers, Boyle really enjoyed the disorienting nature of the ending when he first read writer Alex Garland's script. He recalled to BAFTA, "It returns you to the fact that this is a horror film, but not in a way you might be expecting. They go on to dominate the second film. I thought, this is the most original piece of writing I've seen since Clockwork Orange." Whether it's intentional or not, there are definitely ways that A Clockwork Orange seems to have influenced 28 Years Later. Both films introduce a roving band of thugs who take pleasure in inflicting harm. The difference is that we've only seen the Jimmys hurt infected, not innocent people. Even so, the ending of 28 Years Later reminds audiences that there's more than one type of horror. Like a lot of other popular zombie apocalypse stories, the infected aren't the only threat. Healthy humans are perfectly capable of using the chaotic landscape created by the zombies to do horrible things on their own. According to Boyle, that idea will be at the heart of the Bone Temple. Considering it's been almost 2 decades since 28 Weeks Later came out, it's no surprise that the 28 Years Later script went through a few drafts. And while no one could deny Boyle and Garland really swung for the fences with the ending they went with, things weren't always meant to go that off the rails. Speaking with Scream Rant, they confirmed that someone else had written an earlier version of the film with a much more conventional ending and not a single Jimmy in sight. So Garland had to step in and pretty much rewrite it from there, and that's how we got the ending we're discussing today. Neither of them specified what the original ending would have been, but we're ready to bet that it wouldn't have left fans scratching their heads in quite the same way the way Jimmy and his crew did. And while something so out of left field may seem like a questionable call to fans, it's important to remember the filmmakers are already guaranteed a sequel, so they had more freedom to get weird than a lot of people would in their shoes. And that gamble paid off. 28 years later exceeded its projections and grossed $60 million globally in its opening weekend.
This is a glorious day. A day of judgment.
And with so many unanswered questions, it's pretty much guaranteed viewers will come running back when the Bone Temple hits theaters in January.